Hello, this is a lecture for civics and government on how a Christian can be involved in politics. And so that's the leading issue that I want to address. The question I want us to answer is, how should a Christian be involved in politics? So let me share the PowerPoint with you and we'll get on to discussing this. You'll notice that there are basic two trends when it comes to being involved in politics, and it boils down to either being involved or not being involved, engaging or disengaging with politics. So a few things on this point. First of all, disengagement. Why do people not get involved in politics? Well, for one, there's a sense of apathy and I don't care mentality that can prevail, a sense in which it just doesn't matter, which also is an issue. We'll get more on that. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Another has to do with just flat out ignorance, the belief that you can't make a difference, that there's nothing you can do to make a change. Or in some cases, they just don't know anything at all. And so not learning anything about the political process, therefore, you just stay out of anything political altogether. There's also sometimes that situation where you do learn the process and you find out that it's far more tangled and far more complicated, perhaps, than what you want it to be. And so there is sometimes a matter of a person walking away from politics out of frustration. That is also another reason some people don't get involved. But what are ways you can be involved? I want to just offer a few practical arenas. One is the very first step, and that is to learn more, to be informed. Being involved in this class is a part of that process of being informed. You know more than the average American does about the Constitution, for instance. You know more than the average American about the way our country's governance is organized and is designed to operate. Be informed. You can be part of the process by voting. You can determine, well, what voices shape the laws by which we live. And that's where voting comes into play. Another has to do with once an official is elected to office, even if you didn't vote for that official, you can still email them, write them, contact them in one way or another, even phone them and inform them, hey, I want you to vote for this upcoming bill, or I want you to oppose it, that kind of thing. They pay attention to that kind of communication. You can even take the next step and help a candidate get elected. You can volunteer for them. You can help stuff envelopes, answer phones, go door to door, that sort of thing. You can inform others of the issues. Once you yourself get informed, then you can get into the act of informing others. Then there is the aspect of civil disobedience, which I offer with caution, because it needs to be an issue that really matters. I don't take civil disobedience lightly. And it is something that Martin Luther King modeled for us beautifully in the fight for civil rights. And so pay attention to how that can play out as well. But I want to obviously encourage you and urge you to consider engagement over disengagement. But what I want to offer to is a review of a key passage of scripture from the book of Romans, where Paul writes extensively about a Christian's interaction with government. Let's read that. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God, and consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. And those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and you will be commended. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. For if you do wrong, be afraid. For rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience. This is also why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. So give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. I want to remind you of a few principles that this scripture lays out for us. First is this simple truth. A government's authority comes from God. Now, that doesn't mean that every government is legitimate, because it can misuse that authority, obviously. That authority can be abused. But in terms of maintaining the order and peace of a nation, that authority for a government is God-given. And government, to that end, is to uphold what is in the eyes of God right and punish what is, again, in the eyes of God wrong. Now, again, there might be conflicting ideas about what is right and wrong in a society. We certainly have that in America. But there needs to be some degree of common ground to uphold what is right and punish what is wrong. So as Christians, what that means is that we are to support our governing authorities in their work to govern as they seek to uphold what is right and punish what is wrong. But when governing authorities conflict with God's authority, we are obviously to stick with what God asks us to do. There's a great passage in Acts chapter 4 where Peter and John are hauled before the authorities and told to not preach Jesus anymore. And here's their reply in verses 19 and 20. Which is right in God's eyes, they say, to listen to you or to him? You be the judges. As for us, we cannot help speaking about what we have seen and heard. So yes, you can defy the authorities, but only when you know it's a matter of conscience, when it conflicts with God's authority. Now, what I want to do next is take a quick look at what is called the Manhattan Declaration, which is a call to the church to take a stand on three vital issues that involve political action. Let's take a look. The Manhattan Declaration addresses these issues. The sanctity of life is the first. And in this, what they state is that a culture of death inevitably cheapens life in all its stages and conditions by promoting the belief that lives that are imperfect, immature, or inconvenient can be thrown away or discarded. In fact, here's an actual quote from Mother Teresa at the National Prayer Breakfast of 1994. She said, speaking to the president at that time, and whose administration was pro-abortion, she said, "Please don't kill the child. I want the child. Please give me the child. I am willing to accept any child who would be aborted and to give that child to a married couple who will love the child and be loved by the child." The question for us to consider is, do you agree or disagree that this is an issue that should be of concern in our country? And ask yourself, why should it be? Or why shouldn't it be? And think as a Christian concerning that issue. A second issue that the Manhattan Declaration offers us to consider is the area of the dignity of marriage. And this is an affirmation in this declaration of the marriage is a union of one man and one woman. In fact, the belief is this: marriage is the first and most basic institution of human society. Indeed, it is the institution on which all other human institutions have their foundation. And so that is why it is so important that we take consideration of the health of the family. Because when the family collapses, it is the children that are usually damaged. When it happens on a massive scale, the community itself is crippled. Lyndon B. Johnson said this when he was president. He understood, as many others do, about the health of not only one's family, but the foundation of that family being the marriage. So the question is this also an issue that should be of concern in our country? And why or why not? The third and final area that I want you to think through is the matter of the freedom of religion. The fact is that no one should be forced or compelled to embrace any religion against his or her will. In fact, nor should persons of faith be forbidden to worship God according to the dictates of their conscience, or to express freely and publicly their deeply held religious convictions. Pope John Paul II had this to say: religious freedom, an essential requirement of the dignity of every person, is a cornerstone of the structure of human rights, and for this reason, an irreplaceable factor in the good of individuals and of the whole of society, as well as of the personal fulfillment of each individual. Once again, I ask you to consider, is this something that should be still of concern in our country? Why or why not? Lastly, I want you to just ask yourself, of these three issues, which one are you most concerned about? And how can these principles guide your political involvement when you think about the sanctity of life as a Christian, the dignity of marriage as defined by God in his word, and the principle of the freedom of religion? These are the areas of concern as presented by the Manhattan Declaration. I invite you to continually prayerfully consider them and to further study them on your own. I'll also make available in the Red Resource folder a full copy of the Manhattan Declaration for your personal study. Thanks for your time. Take care.